A few weeks ago, Gallimimus has been announced as the fourth and last dinosaur being added in the upcoming The Isle Update 6.5, bringing into the game the herbivorous counterpart to the current Evrima rule of speed, Carnotaurus. While it isn't necessarily amongst the most popular dinos in the Isle's roster, the changes being made to the scaly emo are rather interesting and worth being talked about. And since new info has been quite scarce recently due to the update stress test being fast approaching, there's no better time to discuss how Galli will perform in the new branch and its impact in the player-made ecosystem. Our speedy fellow was always quite a simple creature back in Legacy days. A small and fragile herbivore built for speed, being amongst the fastest members of the roster, large stamina pool and some great turn radius on top of it. Its damage was extremely poor, but that wasn't its focus to begin with. Galli wasn't made to fight, it was made to run fast. And run fast it did, being so maneuverable that even Carnos at the time had difficulty killing them despite having a slightly higher maximum velocity. Gallis were so fast that they were basically unkillable, not because they were indestructible, but because nobody could hit them in the first place. With this new information drop, the focus on speed was not only emphasized even further, but the dev team also added some few neat mechanics that will help Galli players by adding some extra flavor to their gameplay experience. They begin by explaining that the new Gallimimus will have an acceleration rate slower in comparison to other dinosaurs, a feature that is most likely implemented as a way for carnivores to have a consistent way to successfully hunting them without penalizing their signature aspect, speed. In Legacy, they were way too good on what they were meant to do, to the point that nobody would even try hunting them, taking the danger of survival away from Galli players, which was a clear flaw in its design. A flaw that is now being fixed with this prolonged acceleration, forcing players to be more cautious and alert in order to avoid being ambushed. This, in theory, will not only remove the issue Gallimimus has previously had, but also add a layer of strategy on their daily playthroughs, increasing the dino's gameplay depth. When it comes to its diet, Galli will now be an omnivore, albeit still relying a lot on vegetation. Their new omnivorous side manifests in the form of eggs, small endemic life, and hatchlings of specific species. Note that they say certain species and not just hatchlings in general, so this may be a hint that they might be able to consume all kinds of hatchlings, but some species will give them actual nutrients, something that would explain the devs mentioning that some animals may view Gallis as danger to their young. It is also mentioned that their diets will directly impact their maximum velocity, emphasizing their feeding habits even further. In case they indeed need eggs or hatchlings to obtain a specific nutrient, that may represent a problem though. The idea itself is not bad per se. In fact, it would be interesting to see how Gallis would interact with other dinos, constantly playing a game of cat and mouse trying to yoink an egg without being noticed. That would open up some really interesting scenarios. The problem with this though is not the Galli, but the eggs, or lack thereof. You see, Evrima has a problem that ironically Legacy never had: nesting. In the base game, nesting is an extremely predominant and frequent aspect of all the players' playthrough, especially community servers. Despite being significantly broken and unfinished, the mechanic is a very popular component of the Isle gameplay, particularly for herbivores. Herds would commonly form nesting grounds in specific locations and invite friends or strangers to increase the herd size, a feature that promotes social interaction. You could see nests everywhere, and nest invites were constantly present in global chat even to this day. In Evrima, however, we are experiencing the polar opposite. The mechanic itself is complex and requires actual effort from both players, and the devs even went as far as making courting animations to bound player couples as part of the nesting system, something that players have been asking for a long time now. Before its release, I even made a video praising Afterthought for how good the nesting improvements seemed to be at the time, and a large portion of the community was very excited for that feature to arrive. But once we finally got access to it, something strange happened. After a few weeks of trying the system out, nobody nests anymore. players just didn't bother messing with the mechanic any longer. A problem that still remains today. I may address this issue further in another video, but for this matter in specific, the lack of eggs can pose a serious detriment to galleys if they do indeed rely on such for a specific nutrient. There's always the possibility that they can get that nutrient elsewhere, of course, but for the devs to emphasize this particular aspect of their gameplay, it means that it is expected for galleys to steal eggs for their benefit to an extent, which would be problematic since there's barely anyone nesting in the first place. So far, these changes already fleshed the dinosaur out, giving it more gameplay depth while fixing some legacy issues in the process. But what stands out the most is their exclusive ability. Unlike the majority of dinosaurs present and planned for the Isle, Galli doesn't have an active ability like Carno's Charge, Raptor's Pounce or Pecky's Ram. Instead, their ability is passive. Whenever in the presence of other galleys, their broadcasts will have the additional benefit of providing a temporary speed boost to all members of the group. I think I saw this somewhere. That speed can be increased even further with a good diet like I mentioned previously, so with the two combined, Gallimimuses can become the fastest creatures in the entire game by a large margin. In addition, the duration of the boost can be increased by timing the broadcasts of each individual member of the flock, maintaining maximum velocity more or less indefinitely as long as you have a large enough herd to sustain it. Something important to note here, while the ability itself is pretty generic on its own, the way the devs are trying to balancing it is very interesting. They mentioned that galleys are particularly loud creatures, so if we combine that fact with the idea of using broadcasts constantly to keep their extreme fast movement, it seems that the devs are trying to use sound as a way to counterbalance its kit. That is actually a smart move if we think about it. We know that despite them being able to reach very high speeds, they take a long time to accelerate, which in turn gives predators a larger window to ambush them successfully. But once they reach that velocity, they are basically uncatchable, and they want to stay at that speed, so they need to keep broadcasting. But constantly broadcasting brings attention, and since it's said that they are allowed by default, it probably means that they will be heard from further away, bringing even more attention and for longer periods of time. If we combine all these factors, we basically have a micro gameplay loop where galleys must keep making noise to stay moving at high speed, but making noise will inevitably attract predators, and to avoid predators they must be always moving, and moving fast, and to move fast they need to keep making noise, which attracts more predators. It is a very simple but unique loop that I never saw in a dinosaur game, so I'm really intrigued to see how it turns out once it finally releases. Overall, I believe the devs did a good job improving Galli's gameplay, keeping their signature feature while still making it more engaging and balanced. It may not be a very compelling dino for most players, but this not only means that Galli mains are getting some very needed love, but it also means that all dinos will receive this treatment, which, in theory, will improve their own gameplay experience and make the game more enjoyable for everyone. So in the end, it is a win-win for everybody, even if you don't enjoy Galli that much. A huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for supporting the channel and the content I create. If you wanna join the ranks, the link will be in the description. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and opinions down below, join our Discord server for memes and better stuff, and I hope to see you all next week.